So first, what I have planned, it's really difficult to take a clinical class online, but still what I have planned that I'll describe an imaginary case, um, a short case rather. Sorry. Uh, I'll describe an imaginary case, uh, the history and the examination, and then I'll show the photograph and describe the findings, and then we'll discuss. Okay. Okay. Let me share the screen. Okay. Is it visible? And am I audible too? Hello. Is it
Yes,
visible?
sir.
Can you see the screen? And can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we are talking about a patient who is about 45-year-old male. He attends the OPD with a complaints of dimness of vision in the right eye for last 1 year. The dimness of vision was preceded by pain and redness of the same eye following a trauma with a twig of a tree, which was subsequently treated at the nearby hospital. And it, oh, sorry, I have to record it also. No? Just a minute, just a minute. Yeah. Is it okay now? Is it okay? So
Yes,
that
sir.
45-year-old male attends the OPD with a complaint of dimness of vision in the right eye for last 1 year. And before 1 year, he had an injury of with a twig of a tree in the right eye, and following which there was pain and redness and watering from that eye, for which he contacted a local practitioner, eye doctor, and he was being treated by him by some eye drops. And after treatment for about a month, gradually his complaints improved, like the complaints of watering, redness, pain, and etc. But his dimness of vision remains. His dimness of vision remains. It did not improve. And after some medications, he tried some local doctors. He gave some medicine. It did not improve that much. And then he decided to visit a big hospital in the city and has come to us. So that is the short history. It's a short case, so you don't have to take a long, elaborate history. So this is the short history. And now we examine the patient. Okay. The left eye was normal, so I'm showing only um, the picture of the uh, right eye. So on examination, the visual acuity was uh, the perception of light was present, and projection of rays were accurate in all quadrants. The eyelids were normal. There were not much abnormality in the lashes. There was no swelling. The conjunctiva, both palpebral and bulbar, were normal. No significant congestion or anything. On the cornea, the size of the cornea is all right. At the center of the cornea, covering the pupil, that is, you cannot see the pupil, covering the pupil, there is a white opacity about, when you are describing a corneal opacity, you have to describe just like a lesion which you describe in any other part of the body. That is, you have to say the extent of the opacity, where is it situated, the size, and the shape. It is situated at the middle of the cornea, covering the pupil, covering the visual axis. The size is about maybe it's almost a circular opacity, little irregular, about 6 millimeter in diameter, and over the surface it does not have any prominent vessels or any other pigmentation or any other lesions. Okay. The anterior chamber, which can be visible from the side of the opacity, looks normal. Normal. I mean, you can see the periphery of the anterior chamber. Naturally, you cannot see the center of the anterior chamber because it is covered by the pupil. It is covered by the opacity. And the periphery of the anterior chamber looks like normal, of normal depth, and there is no abnormal content. Especially when you see the bottom of the anterior chamber, you can't see any abnormality there. It's clear. That means it's filled by aqueous humor only. The iris patterns are normal. There is no inflammation of the iris or any abnormality of the iris like neovascularization, any other thing is present. The pupil you cannot see. So naturally, the pupillary size, shape, reaction, all these things are not possible to see. And the color of the pupil also, you cannot see that. What is the status of the lens, that you cannot determine, because you cannot see the pupil at all. So that is your inspection. That is the thing you only you can see. And before that, when I was describing lid, one thing I forgot, and that you have to mention, that you have to give a pressure on the medial part of the canthus, inner canthus, just to see whether there is any regurgitation of mucopurulent material through the lacrimal punctum. Okay, and then you note it as Rho plus negative, which I described in your examination. So it's Rho plus negative. Rho plus is merely an acronym. It's regurgitation on pressure on lacrimal sac. Okay, so Rho plus is negative. So, and another thing on palpation, you have to see that you see the intraocular pressure. Here you see only with the digital method, that is by your fingers. You ask the patient to look down and you reach above the tarsal plate, press the globe over the lid or through the lid by one finger, and you try to feel the impulse of that pressure by the other finger. And that's how you have an idea that what should be the normal impulse if the person has a normal intraocular pressure. So that's why you see the intraocular pressure is normal in this patient. Okay. So these are the findings. Now, what is your diagnosis? What is the most possible diagnosis? What are the diagnoses you have to think of? That is the differential diagnosis. Can you tell me what is the diagnosis of this case? Anybody? As I cannot see you, you have to volunteer. I cannot see you and I can ask you manually, personally. Anybody? Please volunteer. Sorry, yes?
Corneal ulcers.
Corneal ulcer, you are saying. Okay. What is the point in favor of your diagnosis? Tell me, don't hesitate, because I mean, and don't feel shy also, because it's likely that you will make mistake. It doesn't matter. You have just beginning. You are just beginning ophthalmology. So I am not expecting to give a right answer. You will commit mistake. I will correct it, and that's how you learn. If you do not make any mistake, you cannot remember.
So first is pain, redness and dimness of vision, and there is a corneal opacity.
Yes, but that is before 1 year. 1 year ago, he had that injury and he had that complaints of redness, pain, and all those things. But that improved and that subsided after treatment with a local doctor, local ophthalmologist. Okay, so at present, he has only dimness of vision. He doesn't have any other complaint like the pain, redness, and all those things. Did you get my point?
Yes, sir.
He has only dimness of vision. So if it was a corneal ulcer, definitely it can have dimness of vision if it involves the pupil. But can the patient have? I mean, can the patient have? Can the patient be without any symptom like pain, redness, and all these things? Because corneal ulcer is an active disease. It's an active inflammation, and if it is inflammation, definitely the patient will have others show the signs of inflammation like pain, redness, congestion, and all these things. Also, the patient will have symptoms like blepharospasm, that is inability to open the eyelids normally, and because of the reactive iridocyclitis, he will have a little intolerability to light, that is photophobia. That is not there. So no blepharospasm, no photophobia. If you compare with the other eye, there is absolutely no photophobia, no blepharospasm, no watering, no redness. Only there is an opacity at the middle of the cornea. So it cannot be it cannot be a corneal ulcer. If it is a corneal ulcer, then all the acute inflammatory signs will be present. First, you think of the symptoms like pain, watering, redness, and inability to open the eyes, and intolerance to light. So those are the symptoms a corneal ulcer can have. When you examine, you find there is the palpebral aperture is a little shorter than the other eye because of the blepharospasm. That is, exposed part of the bulbar conjunctiva is less. There will be edema of the lids and matting of the eyelashes. The lids will be edematous because of the inflammation. Those things are not there. The conjunctiva will be congested. If it is severe, then it should be totally congested. That is, there will be ciliary congestion as well as conjunctival congestion. If it is mild or early, then at least the ciliary congestion will be there. That congestion is not there here. And if you see the opacity, corneal opacity, or the lesion, rather, we should call it a lesion until the diagnosis is discussed. If you see the lesion, the margin of the lesion, you can see that it's not edematous. That is, it's not elevated from the margin, and it's quite sharp cut. There is no zone of infiltration or zone of haze at the margin. It's quite sharp cut. It ends and the clear cornea starts. Okay, can you see it?
Yes, sir.
There is no end of or zone of haze. So that means there is no infiltration of polymorphonuclear leukocytes or other inflammatory cells, and there is absence of inflammation. So that's why it cannot be a corneal ulcer. So that's how you exclude what you think, and you come to a diagnosis which is the most likely diagnosis, which we call the provisional diagnosis. So if it is not a corneal ulcer, then what could it be? Corneal scar. Very good. Very good. It's a scar. Because what are the points in favor of your scar? Because the scar is basically not inflammatory thing. It was because of the inflammation. It occurred because of inflammation, but that was 1 year ago. The likely events are the patient had an injury with a twig of a tree. And after that, he developed an ulcer, maybe a fungal ulcer, maybe bacterial ulcer. We don't know. That is not possible to say. But he got treated by an ophthalmologist with some eye drops, possibly antibiotic or antifungal. We don't know. He doesn't show any paper. Some cycloplegic must be. And whatever be the treatment, it improved. So the treatment must be right. And the infection subsided, inflammation subsided, but the scar remains. Because of that invasion of the deeper stroma, there is a scar, and we could not prevent the scar. In most of the cases of corneal ulcer, we cannot prevent the scar. After corneal ulcer or any injury, there will be some amount of scar. So that is the precise thing exactly happened in this case. There has been one scar, and so this is, we can call a corneal scar or corneal opacity. Okay, and I don't know whether you remember or not. You can grade corneal opacity in 3 types according to the density of the opacity. If it is very dense, absolutely white in color, we call it a leukoma. Leukos means white. Initially, it's not, oma means tumor, but it's not a tumor, it's a misnomer. But initially, they thought that it's a kind of swelling or white swelling. So they named it as leukoma. So it's a corneal leukoma. It's a corneal scar, or opacity, precisely a leukoma. If it is very faint, that is, the ulcer was or inflammation was halted very early by your treatment or by body mechanism, then maybe only the superficial layers of the stroma is involved and very faint scar is there, which we call a nebula. And in between the nebula and the leukoma, the intermediate thing is called the macula. We will see how does it compare. We will see the picture. So it's a leukoma. It's a corneal leukoma. That is the precise diagnosis you can give. Okay. So this is your diagnosis. Now, what are the differential diagnoses? The differential diagnosis, obviously, one will be keratitis or corneal ulcer, which he said. That is fine. And why this is not? Because I told you why this is not. This is non-inflammatory, that is inflammatory, and all the signs you have to say, the inflammatory signs, and why this is not a keratitis or cornea. That is the number one differential diagnosis. What are the other possibilities? Other possibilities, like it can be an adherent leukoma. What is an adherent leukoma? The difference between a simple leukoma and adherent leukoma is that this leukoma is adherent inwardly to something. To what thing it can be adherent? Only the iris. The iris might come forward and get attached at the back of the leukoma. Then we call it an adherent leukoma. So why some inflammatory process like ulcer end up as leukoma, and why some inflammatory lesions end up as adherent leukoma, that you have to know. So there is a little difference in the pathophysiology or pathogenesis. So if a corneal ulcer it's not necessary that any leukoma will be a consequence of a corneal ulcer only. It can be because after an injury, maybe a penetrating injury was there, the cornea was torn, and it repaired by itself, or it may be repaired by a doctor. It was sutured maybe, but definitely after it heals, it will leave an opacity. So it will end up in a leukoma or any other macula or whatever. Now, this person had a corneal ulcer probably and ultimately ended up in a leukoma, not adherent leukoma. But some people, they will have adherent leukoma. Now, how this adherent leukoma looks like? Adherent leukoma looks like this. Can you see it?
Yes,
There is a scar. There's a linear scar at the mid peripheral part, maybe extending from the 7 o'clock position to the 3 o'clock position or 4 o'clock position, whatever it is. It's about maybe about 8 millimeter in length and 3 millimeter in thickness in or width. The scar is white, so it's a leukoma definitely. But what the difference here you can see from the former picture is that here you can see the pupil. As it is not central, it is peripheral. You can see the pupil. But what about the shape of the pupil? How is the shape? How is the shape of the pupil? Yeah, tell me. Sorry, I can't hear a little loud.
Irregular, sir.
Yes, it is irregular, and as if it is sin that it is drawn towards the opacity, isn't it? It's irregular. That means the uh, at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, or maybe in the infero temporally, it is drawn towards the opacity, and it becomes a, a little longitudinal.
Sir, you are not audible. You are muted, sir.
हेलो हेलो
Yes, sir.
স্যার নেই, আমি বলছি।
বাবা নতুন হয়েছে
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
But could you hear me? I mean, was I disconnected before?
Yes, sir, you were disconnected.
When? I mean, I was just going on and on. Up to which part you have been able to hear? This is so frustrating. Up to which part you have heard?
Sir, in which the
Sorry. Hello.
Sir, again you are not visible.
No, I'm not visible. The visibility is not important. I mean, I just put the video off. That's it. But
Sir, we can see the corneal. We can see the pupil in the corneal scar. The pupil was irregular in shape. Up to that.
PPs was
Adherent lymphoma.
in the adherent leucoma,
Yes, sir.
and you could not hear about the pathogenesis of adherent leucoma.
No, sir.
My goodness, I've talked so many things. I don't know when this thing will end. I have to say everything again then. Just a minute. So this is the thing you were seeing, and after that you could not hear. Is it?
No, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This part.
Okay. So you can see you can see the abnormality of the shape of the pupil, which is getting adhered at the back of the cornea. So that is
Yes.
adherent leucoma. I was talking about the difference of pathogenesis of adherent leukoma and leukoma. Why some of the scars end up as leukoma, and so why some of the scars end up at adherent leukoma. I said that there has to be a perforation to develop an adherent leukoma, not leukoma. When leukoma is formed, there is no perforation. When adherent leukoma is formed, there has to be a perforation. When there is perforation, the aqueous comes out and the iris comes forward and gets adhered at the opening, that is at the where there is a perforation or a rupture. And in the inflammatory process, it gets adhered with the scar. Those pigments from the iris, they get incarcerated in the scar, that process, and you can see the brown pigments over the scar. So in adherent leukoma, you can see those brown pigments coming from the iris. In leukoma, these brown pigments will be absent because they cannot come from the iris, because the iris does not come forward. Okay, is it clear?
Yes.
Okay, so that is the difference, and if you can see clearly, it is difficult to show because it is a two-dimensional picture. You can see the anterior. You have to examine the anterior chamber depth. The anterior chamber depth will be uniform in leukoma. In the previous picture, you cannot. It's difficult to judge the anterior chamber depth because you cannot see the pupil, but you can see the periphery of the anterior chamber where it is shallower than the center, and throughout the periphery, it's uniformly shallow. But in adherent leukoma, when you go away from the scar, that is here in the upper part or in the superior nasal part, you can see the iris or the anterior chamber, that is the distance between the back of the cornea and the iris, is larger. That is, the anterior chamber is deeper there. And when you come to the scar, where the iris is adhered to the back of the scar, you can see the distance from the back of the cornea to the iris is
shallower. It's shorter. That means the anterior chamber is shallow here. Because it is coming forward, getting attached to the back of the cornea. So there will be variable depth of anterior chamber in adherent glaucoma. It will be when you move away from the scar, it is deeper. When you move towards the scar, where it is adhered, the iris is adhered to the back of the scar, it is shallower. So that is one difference you cannot find in a simple leucoma. Okay. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
So that is the difference in pathogenesis of adherent glaucoma and leucoma. So leucoma can develop because of many things. One is a consequence of corneal ulcer, which happened in our case, or there cannot be a corneal, or there may not be a corneal ulcer, just an injury, maybe a sharp cut injury, or maybe a blunt injury, and there was a corneal rupture. And after it heals, naturally it will form a scar. So it may be a consequence of an injury also, not necessarily always consequence of an ulcer. But if there is perforation, there will be most likely an adherent leucoma. If there is no perforation, there will be most likely a leucoma. Okay. Is it okay? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Hello? Okay. Okay. Now, when we describe leucoma, we describe the absence of vascularization there. Now, here is another picture, no, not in our patient, but there is another picture where you can see a leucoma, but you can see there are several vessels coming from the periphery, from the limbus. And obviously the vessels can come from the limbus only, because limbus is the only vascularized portion of the cornea. The other portion of the cornea is avascular. You can see there is one vessels coming from the 8 o'clock position, ultimately branching in a branching pattern, supplying the superior portion of the limb, opacity. There are several vessels coming from below at 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and maybe up to 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 6 major vessels are coming from the below and medially also. Can you see those vessels?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So those vessels are invading the corneal scar. The presence of vascularization. So whether vascularization is present or not, that is very important to mention. Why? Because vascularization why this vascularization occurs? Vascularization occurs because of a body mechanism to heal the ulcer very fast, to provide antibodies to the local place so that it can take care of the infection. It fights the infection and it is healed. That is the purpose of the vascularization the body sends. But like most of the things, this vascularization has got a good side as well as has got a bad side. The good side is when you see vascularization, you can be sure that it's a sign of healing. It is going to be healed within short time. But when this vascularization occurs, you see, though the inflammation has subsided, but it has got some deleterious effect on the treatment or prognosis of the patient. What prognosis? The treatment we'll discuss, but this treatment of an opacity, of any opacity, is replacement of that opacity by a healthy cornea from a donor cornea. That is, you do a cornea grafting. Unless you do a corneal grafting, you cannot remove the scar. And when you take graft from another body, another person, our body will try to reject it. It has always has some mechanism by which it rejects a foreign material. That grafted material is a foreign material to it. It tries to reject. And this phenomenon occurs in any kind of grafting. There are other kinds of grafting, like kidney transplant, liver transplant, heart transplant. But those are all vascular organs. They have high vascularity. So they have more chance of rejection. Cornea is the least vascularized structure. I mean, all those grafting things for which you do grafting. That's why the chance of rejection of cornea is less than those rejection of kidney or liver or heart or lung. because it is less vascular. But still, if the vascularization is there, then body tries to reject it. That's why when you transplant kidney or liver, you do extensive matching between the donor and the recipient. Like you match blood groups, the minor blood groups, the HLA type, and there are other types also, other matching you have to do. But in cornea grafting, you don't have to do that much matching. You do not care about the blood group of the patient, that what was the blood group of that patient and what is the blood group of my recipient. So you take the cornea and implant it, at least for the primary grafting. When there are multiple rejection of cornea grafting, then you do all this matching and all this thing. But for primary rejection, primary grafting, which is the majority of cases, you do not need to see the blood groups and other things because the cornea is avascular. So that's why if you find a vascularization already at the leukoma, you know that the chance of rejection is high when we do treatment by a cornea grafting. That is a bad effect of vascularization. And that's how you should notice or you should note whether there is any vascularization on the scar. Okay? So did you get it? Did you understand?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we were discussing the types of corneal opacity. That if it is a leukoma, this is a leukoma, all right. But if it is not a leukoma, then what are the other possibilities? It could be corneal scar of other names like leukoma or like macula or nebula. As I said, the macula is of least density and the nebula is of least density and macula is of intermediate density between the nebula and the leukoma. The nebula is just like a cloud-like opacity. The top left is the nebula. So if you just have a cursory examination, a casual examination, sometimes you may miss the nebula. But you have to see in a slit lamp or if you examine with a torch, you have to see very carefully to find that there are some opacities, especially at the 9 o'clock position, bordering up to the pupil. There's some faint opacity. Can you appreciate the opacity?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that is a nebular opacity. A very faint opacity. And if you look through the opacity, if you shine a torch through the opacity, you can see the iris patterns. You can see let me magnify it. You can see the iris patterns through the opacity. Okay, it is so light. By contrast, the macula it is not as dense as the leukoma. Like in our patient, the picture I showed, that is very, very white. But this is not as white. But this is not as faint as the nebula. It is of some intermediate density. Here, you can appreciate the margin of the pupil through the opacity. Can you see the margin of the pupil through the opacity? Can you see it? Hello? Hello?
No, sir.
Okay. Can you see the margin of the opacity through the pupil, through the opacity? Margin of the pupil. But you cannot see the patterns of the iris through it. That is obscure because the opacity is slightly more dense than the nebula. That means you cannot see the fine striations or the crypts or furrows of the iris through the opacity. But at least you can see the margin of the pupil underneath. That is the way to differentiate between nebula and macula. And obviously, the leukoma we already discussed in our patient. That is, it's white and the underlying thing is not visible at all. You cannot say the pupillary margin even on the iris markings. You cannot see anything underneath. And it's an absolutely white opacity. That's why it is leukoma. So this is leukoma. The left-hand side is upper one is nebula, and this is macula. This is the way you differentiate between various corneal opacities. And a very pet question of the examiner is that if there is a very small leukoma covering a portion of the pupil like this patient. See, this patient has a very small leukoma. There was a small injury, perforating injury probably, and it has been sutured. And ultimately it healed. They could save the eye. But that opacity which is remaining, it is covering the lower portion of the pupil, but upper portion of the pupil is free. Can you see it? Can you see it? One second, please. Okay. So a major portion of the pupil is free. Clear. But if there is a nebula covering almost whole of the pupil, though it is of less density, which eye will have more dimness of vision? Which eye will have more dimness of vision? The answer is the smaller leukoma will have less dimness of vision. Will have better vision than a diffuse nebula covering the pupil. Why? Because as the whole of the pupil is covered, though you can see the structures underneath. You can see the color of the lens, you can see the pupil. But there is a diffuse or diffuse, very faint opacity. So there will be irregular refraction, which we call diffraction. Diffraction of the light rays which are trying to pass through the pupil, and that will fail to form a point focus on the retina. And if a point focus on the retina is not formed, then we cannot see clearly. Okay. So that's why a diffuse nebula will have more dimness of vision. But here what is happening? The leukoma is at the downside, at the bottom side. So here it's merely obstructing all those lights which are going through it, trying to go through it. But the other area of the pupil, which are clear, they are not obstructing any light, and there is no irregular diffusion or diffraction. And ultimately, the other areas or other rays which are passing through the other clear areas, they form a point focus on the retina, and that's why the vision is better than with a small leukoma, which is covering one portion of the pupil, the other portion of the pupil is free, than a diffuse nebula. Obviously, if the leukoma is so big that it covers all the pupil, I feel it will cause more dimness of vision, but that is not the point. The point is, if it is very small leukoma and the other portion of the pupil is free, then the vision will be better than a diffuse nebula which is covering the most of the pupil. Do you get it? Do you get the point? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that is one thing the examiners are very fond of asking. So in short, that is our case. Now we can think about the what we can do. The patient has come to us for some relief. What was his complaint? The dimness of vision. So can we give him some dimness of vision? Like the picture was like this. Can we give him some relief? Some dimness of some improvement of vision? How do you give? I already said that you have to replace the diseased cornea and you have to replace with the healthy cornea. That is, you do a keratoplasty or cornea grafting. Okay. In cornea grafting, there is a separate class, theoretical class. You will know about the cornea grafting. So I will not go into the detail of cornea grafting. But when we talk of cornea grafting, we talk of taking a healthy cornea from another person. Another person means no live person can donate cornea, not even willfully. That the father says, well, okay, I donate my eye for my son. Sometimes these stupid things can be visible in, can be found in many films. But that is not possible. You cannot, a healthy person or a living person cannot donate his cornea. You cannot take cornea from a living person. It has to be always from a dead person. Always from a dead person. So if somebody dies and according to his wish, his eyes are donated in the eye bank. Then you can get cornea and get replaced in the place of this diseased cornea. So that is cornea grafting. So largely speaking, the cornea grafting may be of two types. One is this full thickness or penetrating graft. Another is a partial thickness or is lamellar graft. One is full thickness, another is partial thickness. The full thickness we call penetrating keratoplasty, the partial thickness. There are various types of partial thickness graft or lamellar graft that you will be taught, or maybe just it will be touched. Not much detail is necessary. Where we, if it is, sometimes it is done for very superficial. If only the superficial part of the stoma is involved, maybe you can replace that part of the cornea, the diseased cornea, and replace very superficial layers from a clear cornea. That is called lamellar keratoplasty. So penetrating the if most of the corneal thickness is involved by the opacity, you don't have any other option but to be a penetrating graft. That is, you have to replace. Otherwise, you can do a lamellar graft. What are the advantages and disadvantages of full thickness and partial thickness graft? The full thickness graft is, the advantage is it is easier to do. Technically, it is easier. With a little training, almost any ophthalmologist can do a penetrating graft. Only you have to suture it all around. But making a lamellar graft is not that easy. You have to have more intensive training for it, because you have to make a proper plane to dissect out the disease part, and you have to make proper plane in the donor cornea also, to take that much of cornea which will be replaced on the recipient cornea. So that is not very easy. And always there is a possibility of graft host interface opacity. Do you know what is graft host interface opacity? It's obvious from the term. That is, you place the graft of the donor over the host cornea. That junction of graft and host, of the host and the donor, there might be some inflammation and opacity formation. And if there is opacity formation there, naturally the vision will be a little diminished. Do you understand it? Anybody has any difficulty in understanding what is a graft? What is the donor recipient interface opacity?
Sri, donor recipient interface opacity type of.
Speak a little loudly.
Sri, donor recipient interface opacity টা একবার বলবেন?
Yes. The donor is the donor cornea which has been taken from the dead body. Okay. And recipient is that patient, all patients. So if we do a lamellar graft for some patient, what you can do, you just shave off the superficial opacity from this cornea. You only leave the clear portion of the cornea, the deeper portion. And over that, you replace the diseased portion of the cornea with a healthy portion of the cornea. So naturally, that donor graft is placed over the recipient graft. Recipient cornea. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
So if you place it over the recipient cornea, there is an interface of donor and recipient, the junction of these two. And when it is placed for quite some time, there might be a little bit of inflammation in that interface, making a very faint scar. And if that scar remains, naturally there will be a different dimness of vision. That is the the host donor recipient host donor interface opacity. Okay, so that is the problem of a lamellar graft. But if there is a penetrating graft, we just replace the whole cornea. So that is the question of any donor host interface. So that is one advantage. Then the advantage of of penetrating graft. Then what is the advantage of lamellar graft? The advantage is that you do not open the eyeball. You do not open the anterior. You do not go to the anterior chamber. You do not open it. So chance of infection is less. And also, as you are not replacing the endothelium, which is healthy, there is less chance of a graft rejection, because it has been seen that the stimulus of rejection usually comes from the endothelium. So as you are not replacing the endothelium, there is a less chance of rejection of a lamellar graft than a penetrating graft. So that's why sometimes lamellar graft is preferred if the scarring is superficial. Did you get it? Why lamellar graft is done? Hello? 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 Am I again
Yes, sir.
disconnected? You can hear me.
Yes, sir.
Oh, fine. So that is the treatment you do, keratoplasty. So that is to be done here to give him some vision. And then how do you know that the keratoplasty will give rise to good vision? Because what are the better prognostic sign in this patient, the patient which we described? How do you know? Because you are doing a cumbersome surgery. You are going to use up a cornea. So that's why you have to be sure that there is a chance of good vision get with grafting. Otherwise, if it is a bogus prognosis, naturally you are not going to waste a cornea on grafting. So what are the signs by which you can know that, well, there is chance of improvement? One is patient's age. Okay. You have to look at the patient's age and for how long this opacity is present, when this process started. That is very important. Our patient is 50 years or 45 years, whatever. And it started for 1 year. Before 1 year, he had a completely normal eye. He had good vision in the eye. That is very, very important to know. So for that, why? Because if the person was a child, or even if this patient was a 45-year-old, but that opacity or that injury and the treatment history, all those things occurred at his childhood when he was 2-year-old, then the prognosis is very bad. Though everything has healed, it has got the opacity, but the history was very old and it occurred at his age of 2 years. Then the prognosis is bad. Why is that? Is there anybody who can tell why the prognosis is bad if it occurred in his childhood? Anybody? Anybody? Please volunteer. Wait, did you understand my question? Or did you hear my question at all? I don't know whether I am disconnected again.
No, sir, we're connected.
Hello. Oh, okay. You could hear, but nobody knows. Anyway, the question is, if he incurred that injury in childhood, then probably there is a chance of amblyopia, because his vision, the visual axis got closed because of the opacity, and his vision did not develop well. Like when we grow up, this light comes into the retina and it goes to the higher centers, lateral geniculate body, occipital cortex, and all this. And because of that stimulation, the centers develop. The same thing occurs in hearing also. The person who cannot hear, they cannot speak. They're deaf and dumb. Because as they cannot listen to any sound, their speech also does not develop. So stimulation is important. So that stimulation was cut off because of that opacity in the developing years. So what is the developing year? It is said that up to 4 year and 5 year, 4 to 5 years, is very, very important that the visual axis remains clear up to 4 to 5 years. Because most of the development that occurs in that period. Okay. And ultimately, it develops slowly, and it becomes almost complete in 9 and 10 years. So if it is below 9 and 10 years, then there is chance of a little bit of dimness of vision remaining, even if you replace the diseased cornea with a healthy one. Even if now the light enters and forms clear image on the retina, still the brain cannot, the higher centers for vision, they cannot really process that stimulus, and the person will have poor vision. That is called amblyopia. Or in colloquial term, or in layman's term, it is called a lazy eye. That you are not finding anything abnormal. That is, there was some abnormality, but you replaced it with a healthy cornea. But still, the optic nerve looks normal, the retina looks normal, still the person cannot see it. That is because of amblyopia. This chance of amblyopia development is more if it occurs before the age of 9 and 10. If it occurs before the age of 4 and 5, where the maximum development takes place, then the amblyopia will be dense. That is, there is very little you can do now. The person cannot see. If it occurs at the age of maybe 7 or 8, most of the development has occurred, but still it was not complete, because it will be complete in 9 and 10 years. Within 9, 10, 11, maybe. It's not a fixed age, but it will be developing, completing a little later. In that case, probably you will have some vision, but maybe a little bit of residual problem might be there. Okay, so the process, if it occurs very early in life, then the chance of development of amblyopia is very high, and the prognosis is bad. But here, it occurred only 1 year ago. That is when he was 44 years old. So the development is complete for him. So there is no chance of amblyopia. That is one good factor. All right? That's why the age is an important determinant whether the prognosis is good or bad. And now we have to see whether there are other factors which may adversely affect the vision. What is that? The vision of the patient. What is the presenting vision of the patient? If you can remember, it was an accurate PL. I mean, the perception of light was there, and accurate PL, the projection of rays were there. That is expected because there is a dense opacity covering the pupil, you cannot see any other thing. But if this person did not have accurate PR, or even this person did not have perception of light, then obviously his retinal nerve fibers were dead. If there was a PL only, the PR was defective, that means there are many, it's grossly abnormal, still some viable fibers are there. That's why PL is preserved. But if PL is also absent, then obviously the nerve tissues of the retina, they are all dead. The optic nerve is dead. And it's no use giving a cornea graft to the patient. So the PLPR has to be accurate for determination whether this person is fit for cornea grafting. And also the intraocular pressure. Here the intraocular pressure is normal. the intraocular pressure is high, then definitely it was high for last 1 year because of that inflammatory process which developed because of the ulcer. And if it is high and without treatment for 1 year, then definitely it has already damaged the optic nerve. And even if you replace the cornea now without taking care of the and nerve tissue is basically once it is damaged, you cannot recover. So even if you take care of the intraocular pressure now by some other means like drugs or the vision is not going to improve because it's almost irreparably damaged because of the intraocular pressure. So the intraocular pressure is also has to be known. So these are the things. One is the age of the patient, the vision, accurate PR, and the intraocular pressure is normal. And the other there are no other abnormalities. So the prognosis is good and we go for keratoplasty. And because as it is a lymphoma, probably a penetrating keratoplasty. Previously, there was some treatment of which is called an optical aneuploidy that is not done. That is, we used to cut off the portion of the iris in the periphery so that there are some light entering the eye. That is, we are creating an artificial pupil in the periphery of the iris. But you do not get a good vision with optical aneuploidy. It is absolute. Nobody does an optical. Treatment is keratoplasty. And definitely you have to remember, which I probably discussed in the cornea class, that is for very superficial ulcer or very superficial scar, there is something called PTK, that is phototherapeutic keratectomy. You shave off the most superficial disease portion of the cornea and just keep it like that. You don't have to replace with anything. And you do it with a laser light. We do it with excimer laser. And this excimer laser is invented by Motilal Bhomi, which I told the story earlier. He's a Bengali and living in the USA. And this optical excimer laser has been developed by him. So you have to remember that we're proud because of him. And that is the basis of the phototherapy. Okay, so that's it regarding the corneal opacity. If you have any question, if somebody has any question, I'll be happy to answer. Is there any question anybody wants to ask?
স্যার ওই ভাস্কুলারাইজেশনের ডিসঅ্যাডভান্টেজটা একবার বলবেন?
হ্যাঁ আরেকবার বল।
স্যার ওই ভাস্কুলারাইজেশনের ডিসঅ্যাডভান্টেজটা একবার বলবেন?
Disadvantage is if a structure is vascularized, then there is more chance of rejection of grafting, because ultimately your aim is grafting, isn't it? If your ultimate aim is grafting, and then if there is more chance of rejection, naturally you do not want it. So a non-vascularized scar will have less chance of rejection. A vascularized scar will have more chance of rejection. That is the disadvantage.
ওকে স্যার, থ্যাংক ইউ।
Okay. So if anybody does not have any other question, then we just wrap it up now. Bye then.
Thank
Have a
you,
nice
sir.
day.
Thank you, sir.